Final Fantasy XIII is by far one of the most hated and scrutinized entries in the Final Fantasy series. Despite pretty solid reviews at launch, it was the fans over the years that made the game sound like it was the worst thing Square Enix has ever released, until Final Fantasy XV came out, but that's not the point. Anyone new who wants to get into Final Fantasy will never, and I mean never, get 13 recommended to them. If anything, they'll be told to stay away. There is literally articles dedicated to just shit on this game. That's how deep this is. I was one of those people that thought it was a big letdown based on my first playthrough way back in the day. In my defense, I was like 13, so please do, excuse my stupidness. But opinions can change. I recently replayed the game, or you could even say I played it for the first time because I actually finished it, and I had a great time. It was far better than I was expecting, and honestly, it kind of shocked me. How could this game be so hated by everyone? So keeping that in mind, I made a video discussing if Final Fantasy XIII is worth playing in 2021. If you've been around for a while, you know I made a few of these videos. There's Final Fantasy 8, 7, 9, and it was only after releasing that video I realized something huge. People loved this game. I was expecting a decent amount of negative comments and dislikes, but instead the video got flooded with people commenting just how much they loved the game. And despite its flaws, it holds a really special place for them. There were also comments from people that have never played it and just telling me how much they would love to give it a go. All of this made me realize one thing. The opinions about 13 that are out there right now are outdated, and in fact, what this game needs the most right now is a second chance. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about why Final Fantasy XIII deserves a remake, or you could even say it needs one. I'll go over some of the reasons the game was received the way it was back in the day, and how that might be different now all these years later. If you're looking for a review or a critique, this is not it, but I honestly recommend you check out the other video I mentioned earlier, as that is a spoiler-free review looking at it from today's perspective. And lastly, it really would mean a lot if you could hit that thumbs up button. It helps grow the channel, plus why not just check out some other stuff I make. But with all that said and out the way, let's just get into it. So, what actually went wrong? Back when it was released, 13 had two major things going against it, that being expectations and the timing of its release. Now today in 2021, it's funny to bring this up because the next single player mainline entry we had suffered from the exact same thing, that of course being Final Fantasy 15. But honestly, we see it every year, regardless what media it is, whether that's gaming, anime, movies, whatever. So many products die because of expectations. I'm not here to say any names, but you know who you are.
Cyberpunk 2077.
Just to be clear, Square Enix was in no way innocent because they were the ones to hype this game up as much as they did. This was the first mainline entry on the next gen, which at the time was obviously the PS3 and Xbox 360. The possibilities for this game were huge. This could be the biggest, most beautiful and stunning game we have ever had from Square Enix. Just look how beautiful Final Fantasy X was on the PS2, and that was 8 years earlier. If they managed that in 2001, just imagine how amazing this will be. And then 13 came out, looking like the most beautiful game entry I've ever had. It looked just like the trailers, but there was an issue. Final Fantasy 13 was all looks, but no personality. Yes, the game was stunning. In fact, even now if you play it on Steam, it's goddamn gorgeous, but that's only a part of the game. When it came to its world and characters, it just wasn't what the people wanted. It just didn't feel like a Final Fantasy of the past that the fans have been loving for all these years. It was very clear Square Enix took a different approach with the game. They wanted something new, something different moving forward, but unfortunately, it's not what the fans wanted. It felt like because 13 was trying so hard to be different and cool, they forgot what made Final Fantasy games so great in the first place. An immersive world full of towns and villages, NPCs to interact with, random areas to explore whenever you wanted, and a lovable and relatable cast. For some, 13 had none of those, leaving them disappointed and often not even finishing the game. The gameplay side of things wasn't perfect either, but I'll get into that in a second. Square Enix did try to fix a lot of these issues later on with 13.2 and Lightning Returns, but for some people it was just too late. The sales of these games just kept getting lower and lower because people lost interest, therefore making this trilogy a failure in some people's eyes and making them wonder why out of all the games we have, this was the only trilogy. So all that brings me to the main question. Why now? Why should we get a remaster now? I've basically done nothing but point out the bad things about the game and how people disliked it back in the day, right? Well, that's it. That was back then and this is now. I mentioned earlier how expectations can kill anything. It doesn't matter if the product is good quality, because if the expectations were great, that means it failed. But sometimes, this can work the other way around. With so many opinions about this game being negative and people hating on it, it becomes easier to be impressed or surprised. That's essentially what happened to me with my recent playthrough. My first experience was kinda crappy, so I wasn't expecting much. But then by the end of it, I was shocked by how much I fell in love with 13. If I went into the game expecting it to be a top tier experience, I probably wouldn't have felt that way, and I would have been a little bit let down. Outside of his fanbase, 13 has a pretty bad reputation, so with a remaster, things really can't get any worse, can they? I mean, I hope not. And what I'm about to say might come off a bit random, but trust me, this actually makes a lot of sense. Another reason players might give this 13 remaster a go is because Final Fantasy 15 is the new Final Fantasy 13. When people talk about a worst and most disappointing game in the series, it's no longer 13 without a question. I'd say there's more and more people saying 15 is the new king of being the most disappointing entry, but it's still a king. All those people that miss innovative turn-based combat, well, here you go, boom, a nice and clean version of Final Fantasy 13 Remastered. It really is a case of, you don't appreciate it until it's gone. If Square actually does this though, what's important is that they make some actual adjustments, not just call it a remake and release it for full price. When Final Fantasy 12 got re-released as Zodiac Age, it came with a lot of improvements plus additions to the gameplay, making it easily the better experience. So if 12 got that treatment, I'm sure 13 can as well. Now, I'm a big fan of 13's combat. I've said it before, in my opinion, it's one of the best ones we've ever had in Final Fantasy, but it can still be improved. So first things first, using more than one character in battle. Despite the paradigm shift being quite strategic and I'm a big fan of it, 13 is very limiting when it comes to who you control. You can't switch who you play as during battle, and that's not to mention until chapter 9 the game literally picks who you play with. Keep in mind this game has 13 chapters in total, okay? That's basically 70-75% of that game you do not have a choice. Initially, I didn't have a huge problem with this, but there's two problems that come with it. Firstly, you can only use summons of whoever you're playing as. This is ignoring the fact that summons are actually trash in this game, but that's another topic. For me, Lightning was by far my favourite character to play as, but Odin was literally useless. On the other hand, Bahamut was in my opinion the only good summon, which meant that I had to play as Fang all the time if I wanted to use him. Now, this isn't the end of the world, or at least it shouldn't be, if it wasn't for the second issue. If the character you're controlling dies, you have to restart. I don't understand how this could be a thing. It is so limiting if you play as someone with low HP, and it discourages you from trying out new people. Another thing that should be added to this, and this is very personal, please add the option to run rather than just restarting the fight. I hated the fact that throughout the entire game there's enemies blocking your path, and if you couldn't beat them, you essentially couldn't progress. My issue wasn't so much not being able to progress, but sometimes I just didn't feel like fighting. Maybe I just wanted to speedrun the game. And then some other quality of life changes like 60 frames per second, double speed, chapter selection, all of those would definitely be appreciated, as well as a bit of a graphical boost, because even though the game is still gorgeous, I know you can do better, Square. And all of that brings me to one final question, and this is one that I can't really answer because I haven't played 13.2 or Lightning Returns, so it's actually more of a general question for you guys. If this remaster happens, should it be just the base game or the entire trilogy? I know this video was just about 13, but why not just release the whole thing? If someone really likes 13 after playing the remaster, wouldn't you want to provide them with the next game as well? From a business perspective, this would also be the smarter choice. You could literally price each game individually, but then sell it as a package for a slightly better price. Most of the time, if people are planning on playing all of them, they'll just go for the whole package, meaning you make more money straight away. If I had to guess, I would assume they would sell the entire trilogy together, based on the fact that 10 and 10.2 were together as a whole package. Let's be honest, I don't think many people would have paid a lot for 10.2 on its own, but because it came with 10, they actually gave it a go. I was one of those people. But that's just my opinion on things, so how about you guys? Do you think 13 deserves a remaster, and if so, should it be 13 or the entire trilogy? If you want the remaster to happen, what would be the main thing you want improved or you want to see adjusted? Let me know down in the comments. Also, real quick, the second episode of Final Fantasy Hot Takes will be coming soon, so if you haven't already, let me know your unpopular Final Fantasy opinions in the comments so that I can include them in the video. There's some really good ones already, but let's get some last minute ones. As always, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure to drop a like and maybe subscribe for future videos. We're still growing, nearly at 500 subs, but the goals are way bigger than that for the channel. That's all I've got for today though, so once again, thank you, I'll see you in the next one, and I'm out.